By the time the supper bell rang, my hands were so numb I could barely feel the splinters buried in my palms. I knelt on the stone floor of the slaughter shed with a bucket of gray water between my knees, scrubbing blood from the drainage grooves before it froze. Steam rose off the carcasses hanging above me. Iron and rot coated my tongue every time I breathed. My right wrist throbbed where Torrin had twisted it that morning for moving too slow. The bruise had spread up my forearm, ugly and yellowing at the edges. Not there, mongrel. There. Luna Cellini's voice cracked through the shed like a whip. I flinched and looked up. She stood in the doorway wrapped in white fur, silver rings flashing at every finger. Her lips were painted the same red as the blood pooled at my knees. Behind her, two girls my age, pack daughters with thick hair and clean boots, watched me with that familiar mixture of pity and relief. Pity that I existed like this. Relief that it wasn't them. Celine pointed with the tip of her riding crop. If the inspectors see streaks in the stone tomorrow, I'll have your skin for polishing cloth. Do you understand? Yes, Luna. Lies came easiest when my head was down. My stomach clenched hard enough to make me dizzy. I hadn't eaten since yesterday's heel of stale bread. The cold made everything hurt sharper. My ribs where Garrick's boot had landed last week, my shoulder where the branding iron had kissed skin the year before, my lower back where a scar puckered from the time they said I'd stolen meat and held my hand over a brazier until I confessed. I hadn't stolen it. It hadn't mattered. Cellini stepped closer, wrinkle deepening in her perfect nose. Look at you, 19 and still nothing. No wolf, no scent worth naming, no heat, no rank. Your mother should have drowned you when she had the chance. At my mother, something in my chest went tight and raw. I kept scrubbing. She won't answer you, one of the girls muttered with a laugh. She thinks if she stays quiet, she looks noble. Celine's crop struck my shoulder. Not hard enough to break, hard enough to sting. You look like what you are. A dead branch on a dead line. Her smile sharpened. The Ashthorn bloodline is extinct. Everyone knows that. You're just leftover mud with a famous name stitched on it. Extinct. They'd been saying that since I was old enough to understand words. Ashthorn healers once served kings, commanded bone and blood and moonlight, stories told like bedtime myths. Then plague, wars, massacres, whatever version the teller liked best. Gone, finished. Dust. My mother used to trace circles on my wrist and whisper, "It doesn't vanish, Mara. It sleeps." She died before I turned 13. Sleep felt a lot like death after enough years. Celine turned to leave, then paused. Bring her to the hall after cleanup. Garrick wants all hands present for Torrin's trial hunt announcement. The girls drifted after her, perfume and laughter trailing behind. When the door banged shut, I let my forehead drop to the stone. For one stupid second, I imagined standing, hurling the bucket at the wall, and running until my lungs tore open. But where? We were 3 valleys from any neutral settlement. Every surrounding border belonged to a pack that marked runaways, returned them for favors, or mounted their heads as warnings. I scrubbed until the grooves were clean enough to see my reflection in the wet. Hollow cheeks, split lower lip, dark eyes too big in a face carved thin by hunger. My hair, once copper like my mother's, looked like dirty rope. By dusk they marched me into the great hall. Torrin sat at Garrick's right hand like he already wore the alpha chain. Broad shoulders, smug mouth, fresh kill cloak still damp at the hem. He was 22 and had never been told no long enough to remember the sound. Garrick raised his cup. Tonight we celebrate strength. Tomorrow at dawn, my son leads his first border trial with 6 chosen hunters. Cheers shook the rafters. Mead horns clanged. Torrin stood and basked in it, then looked straight at me. And because every hunt needs bait, we'll finally get use out of this one. Laughter erupted. I froze beside the serving table, tray cutting into my fingers. Garrick didn't laugh. He watched me with those pale, dead eyes that never warmed no matter the season. Step forward. I obeyed. The hall smelled of roasted venison and hot yeast. My body screamed for food. Garrick leaned back in his carved chair. You heard my son. At dawn, you run the eastern tree line. If his team catches you before the bell, you live and return to labor. He let the pause stretch. If you cross the old stones before capture, you're exiled and marked rogue. Exiled into enemy land, into territory rumored to belong to the Alpha King himself, the one Pax used to frighten pups into obedience. Either way, I was prey. Celine smiled over her cup. Be grateful, girl. Most useless mouths get culled quietly. I swallowed. Alpha, I didn't do anything. Torrin barked a laugh. Exactly, for 19 years. More laughter. Someone tossed a bone that hit my ankle. Garrick's voice dropped low, the kind that made younger wolves cower without thinking. You exist under my roof. That's the only mercy you've had. Tomorrow you earn it. My fingers tightened on the tray until wood creaked. Rage flashed bright and reckless, then died under habit. Never show teeth. Never give them reason. Yes, Alpha. That night they locked me in the grain cellar with no blanket and a single cup of water. Rats moved in the walls. Above me, the hall sang late into darkness. I did not sleep. At first light, 2 guards hauled me up the cellar stairs and through the yard. Frost bit my bare feet through cracked soles. Torrin's hunters waited by the eastern gate with painted faces and polished knives. They looked excited, almost festive. One had tied bells to his belt so I'd hear him coming. Torrin stepped close enough that only I could hear him. Try to make it entertaining, Bone Girl. If I catch you first, I might keep you a while before I bring you back. His breath smelled of clove and meat. My skin crawled. A horn sounded once. Garrick's steward cut the rope at my wrists and shoved me toward the open gate. Run. I ran. The first minutes were all ice and terror, frozen grass slicing my ankles, breath burning, bells and shouting exploding behind me. Branches whipped my face. My lungs felt too small. I knew this forest from wood-gathering roots, knew where the ground dipped into bog and where roots broke the surface like knuckles. I cut hard left toward the ravine, slid down shale, waded creek water that knifed my calves. Behind me, hunting cries rose and fell. Torrin was laughing. At the ravine edge, I almost went down. Loose rock shifted under my weight. My knee struck stone. Pain shot upward. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood and kept moving. Old stones, my mind chanted. Reach the old stones. The eastern boundary wasn't a fence but a ruin. 6 monoliths half swallowed by moss, older than any pack treaty. Past them, no one from our pack hunted. Past them, law changed teeth. A bell rang once in the distance. Half the allotted hour gone. I burst through a stand of pines into a clearing and saw them, gray pillars jutting from the earth like broken ribs. Relief hit so hard I almost cried. Then a weight slammed between my shoulders. I hit the ground face first, dirt filling my mouth. Torrin's hand fisted in my hair and yanked my head back. Found you. His knee pinned my spine. I thrashed. He only laughed, pressing harder until black sparks danced at the edge of my vision. Please, I gasped. I hated that word. I'll go back. I'll work. Please. Oh, you'll go back. His voice thickened with excitement. But first, I'm done pretending I don't want my reward. He rolled me onto my back and ripped at the collar of my shirt. Cold air hit skin. I clawed at his face. He caught my wrists in one hand and slapped me so hard my ear rang. Hold still, trash. Something old and feral tore loose inside me then. Not wolf, not exactly, but heat, furious and bright. My bones hummed. For one impossible second, the world sharpened. Each pine needle, each pulse in his throat, each grain of dirt stuck to his cheek. I drove my knee up. He cursed, grip loosening. I twisted, grabbed the hunting knife at his belt, and sliced blindly. Steel bit flesh. Hot blood sprayed my hand. Torrin screamed and reeled back, clutching his face. 4 ragged lines opened from brow to jaw, already pouring red. "You," he choked. "You carved me." Voices crashed through the trees. His hunters were close. I stared at the blood on my fingers, shock buckling my legs. I had never drawn blood from him before. Never dared. If they caught me now, there would be no labor, no exile. Only execution, slow and public. I ran again, shirt torn, one shoe gone, lungs shredding with each breath. Torrin's rage roared behind me. "Kill her! Don't mark her! Kill her!" The clearing spun. I threw myself between the nearest 2 monoliths, just as an arrow hissed past my shoulder and buried itself in bark ahead. Crossing the stones felt like stepping through cold fire. The air pressure changed. Heavy. Electric. The hairs on my arms lifted. For a heartbeat, my scars burned like fresh brands, and deep in my left wrist, the birthmark my mother used to kiss flared hot under skin. I stumbled downhill into unfamiliar forest where the trees grew taller, darker, and utterly silent. No hunting cries followed, no bells. I didn't stop until my legs failed. When I woke, the sun had shifted and snow was starting. Thin, dry flakes that melted on my split lip. I was curled beside the roots of a fallen cedar, shaking hard. My knee had swollen to twice its size. Blood had dried stiff on my sleeve and under my nails. My head pounded. I listened. No voices, no pack scent I knew. Just wind in high branches and, far away, the sound of water hammering stone. Enemy land. Every story said the Alpha King's sentries killed trespassers first and sorted names later. I should have stayed hidden until dark. I should have turned back and begged for chains. Instead, hunger pushed me upright and fear kept me moving. By dusk, I found a path too clean to be animal-made, packed hard with boot prints and horse tracks. Torches burned in iron brackets along the cliff wall, each flame blue at the base. My pulse stumbled. Civilization meant people. People meant risk. I followed anyway. The forest opened without warning onto a wide valley ringed by black stone battlements. Banners snapped in the wind, midnight cloth stitched with a silver crown over a crescent wolf. Watchtowers rose above the gate, and wolves the size of ponies paced the parapets in paired patrols. Even from this distance, I could feel the disciplined hum of the place, like standing near a drawn bowstring. A horn blew from the left tower. "Stop where you are!" I froze in the torchlight, hands raised. Shapes detached from the shadows. 6 warriors in dark leather, bows already drawn, arrowheads glinting. Their scents hit me in a wave. Cedar oil, steel, snow, and power so dense it made my battered instincts curl inward. Their leader, a scarred woman with iron-gray braid, stepped close enough to study my face. Her gaze dropped to the blood on my shirt, the ripped collar, the old brand at my shoulder. Name. My throat worked. Mara. Pack. I hesitated. If I told truth, they might drag me back as a political courtesy. If I lied, they'd scent it. Before I could answer, hoofbeats thundered behind the patrol. The warriors split instantly, bows lowering in one synchronized motion. A black stallion emerged between them, breath smoking in the cold. Its rider wore no crown, only a dark cloak clasped at the throat with silver bone. He dismounted before the horse fully stopped, boots landing soundless in frost. Tall, broad, presence like winter itself. Clean, lethal, impossible to ignore. Everyone bowed their heads. No one needed to say his name. The Alpha King looked at me once, and the air in my lungs disappeared. His eyes were not the icy blue of Garrick's, but storm dark, almost black, ringed faintly with molten gold at the iris like embers under ash. He stepped closer, then halted so abruptly the patrol exchanged glances. His nostrils flared. "What is that scent?" he said. Not to me, voice low and edged. From behind him, an older man in healer's gray pushed forward, satchel bumping his hip. He reached for my wrist before I could flinch away, fingers pressing the skin over my pulse. The place with my birthmark burned under his touch. His expression changed. First concentration, then disbelief. He looked up at the king, face gone pale. "My liege," he whispered, "it's in her bones." "It can't be," the scarred patrol leader murmured. The healer was still holding my wrist like he'd touched a live coal. Snow gathered in his gray brows. I know what I felt. The king's gaze never left my face. "Say it plainly, Aemon." Aemon swallowed. "Ashthorn." The word struck harder than any blow Torin had ever landed. I laughed once, a cracked sound. No. Not because I didn't want it to be true, because wanting had hurt too many times. The king stepped forward. I should have backed away. Every instinct I'd learned in Garrick's pack screamed to keep distance from powerful males, to make myself small, to survive. But when his hand closed around my uninjured wrist, survival vanished under something stranger and far more dangerous. Heat shot up my arm like lightning finding metal. My breath caught on a sharp, helpless inhale. The world narrowed to contact. His palm calloused and warm, my pulse hammering against his thumb, the air between us suddenly too thick to pull into my lungs. The birthmark at my left wrist blazed as if someone had pressed a brand fresh from fire straight into bone. His body went rigid. A low sound tore out of him, not quite a growl, not quite a word. Gold flared through the dark of his irises, molten and wild. I watched it happen, unable to look away, as his pupils narrowed and his chest rose hard. Once, twice, like he'd been punched from the inside. The warriors around us shifted, boots scraping frost. One whispered, "By the moon." I didn't hear the rest. Something answered him inside me. Not a full wolf, not the clean, familiar shift surge I'd seen pack wolves take all my life. This was deeper and older, like a sleeping creature turning over at the bottom of a frozen lake. Bone deep, blood deep. A hum under my skin that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat where our wrists touched. Fear hit first, then confusion. Then, to my horror, a pull so fierce my knees almost gave out. Mine. The thought wasn't mine. Or maybe it was. It echoed between us, raw and startled and primal. I tried to jerk free. He let go instantly, as if burned. We stared at each other. Snow settled on his shoulders and melted there. My torn shirt clung damp to my chest. Cold needled my skin, but the place where he'd touched me still burned. My mouth tasted like iron and winter. If anyone had spoken, I wouldn't have heard them. His face, hard, controlled, carved from command, had split with something like shock. Not triumph, not possession, recognition. His voice, when it came, was rougher than before. "Look at me." I already was. For one long, impossible heartbeat, we stood in locked silence while the bond, because there was no other word for it, snapped tight as a drawn wire between us. Desire flashed through me, hot and humiliating, tangled with panic so intense I shook. This was a trick, I told myself. A stress reaction, blood loss, hunger. Anything but fate. Fate had never done me favors. The king blinked, and some of the wild gold receded. Command dropped over him like armor sliding into place. He turned to Aemon. "She's injured." Aemon opened his mouth, likely to say and unprecedented and possibly dangerous. The king cut him off with one look. Now, the patrol leader bowed. Yes, sire. Sire. Of course. Alpha King. I took one backward step, then another until my heel caught on a root. Don't, I said, voice thin. I'm not going in chains. No one moved. The king faced me again, hands visible at his sides. No chains. I laughed that broken laugh again. Easy promise. His jaw ticked. In my territory, my word is law. I had lived too long under liars to trust certainty, but his scent, snow, steel, cedar, and something smoke-sweet beneath it, didn't carry deception. It carried tension, hunger held on a short leash, and restraint so deliberate I could almost feel it like a second pulse. He took off his cloak, heavy black wool lined in fur, and held it out. I stared at it, then at him. He didn't step closer, didn't try to drape it over my shoulders himself. Just waited, arm extended, giving me room to choose. That tiny courtesy hit me harder than the bond. My fingers shook as I took the cloak. Warmth wrapped around me, startling after so many years of cold. Thank you, I whispered before I could stop myself. Something unreadable moved across his face. You're safe here. Safe. Another word I'd stopped believing in. Still, when my knee buckled, it was Eamon I leaned on. Not because I trusted them, not yet, but because the king had said no chains and, so far, no one had contradicted him. They brought me through a side gate into a fortress carved from black stone and moonlight. That was my first stupid thought. Seeing torchlight skate across polished obsidian walls, hearing the ordered rhythm of boots on flagstone, feeling pack power everywhere. Vast, disciplined, nothing like Garrick's brute fear-rule chaos. Wolves moved in efficient currents, warriors and servants and messengers weaving past one another without collision. No shouting, no drunkenness. No one kicked at me for standing in the wrong place. They stared, though. Gods. They stared. At the blood on my hands. At the torn collar. At the king's cloak around my shoulders. At him walking half a step behind me like he was restraining himself from closing that distance. Eamon pushed open double doors into a healer's ward washed in herb smoke and lamplight. Shelves of jars lined the walls. Comfrey, feverfew, wolfsbane sealed in black glass. Rolled bandages stacked with military precision. The air was warm enough to make me sway. On the table, Eamon said gently. I flinched anyway. He paused, hands lifting in peace. No one will touch you without warning. Sit, Mara. Hearing my name in this place sounded wrong, like someone speaking in my mother's voice after she was gone. I sat. A young healer apprentice reached for my torn shirt with scissors. I jerked back, breath spiking, and the room snapped taut. The king was there before I tracked him moving. Stop, he said. The apprentice froze. His gaze flicked to me, then away deliberately, giving me privacy even in a room full of strangers. Bring a female healer, privacy screen, fresh clothing. Eamon nodded once. At once. No, I blurted, panic sharpening everything. No tricks. No drugging me. No. My throat closed on the rest. No being held down. No hands where I didn't want them. No Torin. The king's face hardened at whatever he read in mine. Not at me, at the implication. He took one slow step back, then another until he stood near the door instead of looming at my side. No drugs unless you request pain relief. No one male inside your screen. Eamon will explain each treatment before he does it. I stared, waiting for the hidden hook. It didn't come. He looked to Eamon. Document every injury. Eamon's brows rose. For medical file? For evidence. The word rang heavy. Of what? I didn't know. Of crimes? Of war? Of the way Torrin's hand had bruised my throat so many times I'd lost count. The female healer arrived, a stern woman with silver thread braids and kind eyes that didn't pity me. She introduced herself as Talia, waited for my nod before touching me, and cleaned the cut on my cheek, while narrating every movement like Eamon had been ordered. When she reached my collar, she said, "I need to inspect your shoulder and ribs. I can cut the shirt away from the torn seam, or you can remove it yourself behind the screen." Choice. They kept giving me that impossible thing. "Myself," I said. "Of course." A screen unfolded around the exam table. Fabric rustled. Outside, I could hear low voices, Eamon issuing instructions, drawers opening, the distant echo of boots in the corridor. Beneath it all, a steady presence at the door. The king hadn't left. I peeled the shirt off with numb fingers and bit down a cry when fabric dragged over bruised skin. Fresh air kissed old scars. Shame crawled up my neck out of reflex. Talia sucked in a breath. Moon above. I almost apologized for the damage done to me. Instead, I clenched my jaw and held still while she worked salve into split skin and wrapped my ribs. "Knees swollen," she muttered. "Likely ligament strain, maybe fracture hairline. You should be in bed." I barked a humorless laugh. "I don't think beds are for people like me." Talia met my eyes. "Tonight they are." When the screen came down, I wore a plain linen shift and soft wool leggings too fine for a servant, with the king's cloak still around my shoulders. Eamon splinted my wrist, checked my pupils, and offered a cup that smelled of willow bark. "Pain draft," he said. "Mild. No sedative." I glanced at the king. He didn't nod, didn't command, just watched. I drank. Warmth spread slowly through my aching limbs. My body uncurled one guarded inch at a time. The king finally spoke, voice low. "You should rest." "Then what?" I asked. "Questioning? Cell?" His expression went flint hard. "Guest chamber. Guarded for your safety." I almost smiled at the absurdity. "From who?" His answer was immediate. "Anyone who forgets themselves?" Someone forgot quickly. They had just settled me onto a narrow bed in a side chamber off the ward. Clean blankets, a basin of hot water, a single barred window looking over torchlit courtyards, when the door swung open without a knock. A broad-shouldered warrior strode in, crimson captain's braid at his temple, hand on his sword hilt. He smelled of horse and impatience. "Sire," he said, not taking his eyes off me, "the council requests immediate—" Then his lip curled. "That's the rogue?" I went still under the blanket. The king, who had been standing near the hearth with arms folded, did not move. "Captain Reese, you were not invited in." Reese ignored that. "With respect, we can't leave an unidentified female in royal quarters wrapped in your cloak. She crossed border stones bleeding another alpha's blood. Could be bait. Could be plague-marked. Could be carrying—" "Enough." Reese kept going, voice hard. "We should collar her. Isolate her in the lower cells until the moon test confirms." The next part happened too fast for my tired eyes. One blink, the king by the hearth. Next blink. Reese slammed against the stone wall, boots off the floor. The king's hand locked around his throat just below the jaw. No theatrics, no roar. Pure, terrifying efficiency. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Gold rimmed the king's eyes again, brighter this time. "You will not," he said softly, and the softness was worse than shouting. "Speak of collaring her in my presence." Reese's face darkened. "Sire, protocol." "Protocol does not outrank me." The captain's gaze flicked toward me, then back. Stubborn fear warring with loyalty. "If she's what Eamon thinks she is, she's political fire. If she's what your wolf thinks she is—" He choked as fingers tightened. "Then you're compromised." The king leaned closer. "Then hear me clearly while you still can. No one touches her without consent. No one questions her without me or Eamon present. No one insults her blood, her body, or her status. Break that, and I remove the hand that did it. Silence. Rhys swallowed hard. Yes, sire. The king released him. Rhys stumbled, caught himself, and bowed stiffly without looking at me. He left, door clicking shut behind him with military precision and the faint tremor of a man newly aware of his mortality. I realized I was gripping the blanket so hard my knuckles had gone white. The king turned toward me, and all that lethal force sheathed away so abruptly it made my head spin. He kept distance, as before. Did he frighten you? He asked. I let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh. Him? No. A corner of his mouth almost moved. I studied him. This man who could have taken, ordered, claimed, caged. This man who had instead offered cloak, choice, witness, and teeth bared in my defense. In Garrick's hall, power always demanded someone smaller to crush. Here, for the first time in years, power had turned outward instead of down. I didn't trust the bond. I didn't trust fate. I barely trusted my own shaking body. But when he said, "Rest, Mara, I'll be outside," I believed him. And for the first time since I crossed the old stones, I let my guard lower, just enough to close my eyes. I didn't sleep long. The pain draft dragged me under, but fear kept one eye open. Somewhere between waking and dreaming, voices bled through the door. Low at first, then sharp enough to cut through the fog in my skull. Not asking, the king said. Another voice answered, smooth as polished bone. No, you are declaring, in front of your council, over a nameless stray. My eyes opened to darkness lit by hearth embers. I stayed still. Her name is Mara. A soft, derisive laugh. How touching. Will you carve it into the throne too? The hairs at my nape rose. I knew cruelty in all its tones. This one wore silk over a blade. I pushed up on my elbows, blanket clutched to my chest. Through the crack beneath the door, two sets of shadows stretched and shifted in the corridor. One broad and still, one lean, restless. The stranger spoke again. She crossed from Blackridge territory covered in blood. Hours later, your healer claims she carries a dead bloodline, and you place her in royal rooms under guard? You hand your enemies a story and call it mercy. She came injured, and you came compromised. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Then the stranger dropped his voice. Do not mistake me, nephew. I care nothing for your rutting instincts, but I care for this kingdom. If the packs hear you've scented a mate in a border rogue, they will challenge your judgment before moonrise. Some already do. Nephew. That word settled cold in my stomach. The king's reply came flat. Leave. Not until you sign the writ. Paper rustled. I imagined a narrow hand extending it, patient as venom. You know the law, the stranger continued. Unverified border crossers with unknown gifts fall under council quarantine. Lower hold, silver restraints, no outside contact until moon test, 3 nights. If she survives and proves clean, you may keep your pet. My nails bit my palms. The door jerked, and I flinched. Then realized it was opening outward, not in. Eamon slipped inside, shut it quietly behind him, and put a finger to his lips. His face looked 10 years older than it had an hour ago. I mouthed, Who? He leaned close enough that I could smell sage and worry. High Regent Varric, he whispered, the king's uncle, head of the council while the king's on campaign. He controls treasury, law courts, and half the city guard. Outside, Varric said, louder now. If you refuse procedure for this girl, every rival alpha from here to the southern marshes will smell weakness. The king answered, Then let them. Varric's shadow paused. When he spoke again, the silk was gone. You are one bond-sick decision away from civil fracture. Do not force my hand. Footsteps retreated. Another set followed, slower. Boots I had already learned to recognize, even through stone. Aemon exhaled only when the corridor fell quiet. "What does he want?" I whispered. "The throne," Aemon said without hesitation. "Not the seat itself, control of it. He has it now because you know nothing of our politics, and the king has refused every alliance marriage they offered. If this," he glanced at my wrist, at the place still faintly hot from the king's touch. "If this bond is real, Varric loses his leverage overnight." My mouth went dry. "So he'll try to kill me." "If he can do it without open blame." Aemon's eyes hardened. "Or discredit you. Or force you into legal custody where accidents happen in locked rooms." A knock came, 3 short taps. Aemon straightened. "It's me," the king said from outside. Aemon opened the door. The king stepped in, and the room seemed to narrow around him. He'd removed his cloak and outer weapons, but tension rode him harder than steel ever could. "Varric invoked quarantine," he said to Aemon. "I denied it." "Then he'll invoke it through council vote," Aemon said. "By dawn." "I know." The king looked at me. "Can you stand?" I nodded before testing whether that was true. The floor tilted, but I stayed upright. "We move you," he said. "Not to cells, to the inner wing. Fewer access points." I swallowed. "Will that stop him?" "No," he said. "It buys us time." Time felt thinner than paper. They moved me through service corridors instead of grand halls, Talia at my side, 2 silent guards ahead, the king behind us close enough that I felt the pull of him like heat at my back. Every corner smelled of stone dust, lamp oil, and watchfulness. Doors opened before us, shut behind us, bolts sliding home with final clicks that should have made me feel safe. They didn't. At the inner wing, Aemon set up in a small consultation chamber. 1 table, 1 brazier, 1 narrow window barred in iron. He placed a shallow silver basin in front of me and pricked my finger with a clean lancet. "1 drop," he said. "Lineage resonance. Harmless." The king stood across from me, arms folded, jaw set. He hadn't touched me since outside the gate, and my body hated the distance enough to make me angry at myself. Blood welled bright and dark. It hit the basin with a tiny metallic ping. At first, nothing happened. Then the surface rippled outward in concentric rings, not red but pale gold, as if moonlight had dissolved into liquid. Symbols I didn't recognize flashed and vanished along the basin's rim. The brazier flame bent toward me. Aemon went still. "By all mercies." Talia crossed herself in the old moon sign. "It's true." I stared at my own blood shining like a star drowned in water. "Dormant ashthorn markers," Aemon said, voice unsteady with awe. Not full active expression, but present. Ancient enough to evade standard scenting. It was sleeping in marrow. My mother's voice echoed in my skull. "It sleeps." A knock struck the door hard enough to rattle hinges. Before anyone answered, it opened, and Captain Reese stepped in, looking as if he'd run here at full speed. "Sire, Border Hawk from Blackridge, urgent." He handed over a sealed strip of leather. The king broke it, scanned, and his expression turned to stone. "Read it," Aemon said. The king handed him the message instead. Aemon read aloud, each word colder than the last. "To the Crown Wolf of the Northern Vale, a criminal slave of Blackridge named Mara Ashthorn attacked and permanently maimed my heir during sanctioned trial. She fled into your lands. Return my property in chains by next moonrise, and I will consider this a private disciplinary matter. Refuse, and I will interpret harboring as an act of aggression." Signed, Alpha Garrick. Property. The room blurred at the edges. Reese swore under his breath. He sent copies to 3 neighboring packs, public channels. "Of course he did," Aemon muttered. Varric will use this in council by dawn. Claim harboring you risks war. The king's eyes lifted to mine. You are not going back. The certainty in his voice cracked something tight inside my chest. War could kill thousands, I said. For one servant. His gaze sharpened. You're not a servant. You're under my protection. The bond hummed, deep and hungry, and for one terrifying second I wanted to step into him, into that promise, and let someone else be strong for me. I locked my knees. Protection can turn into a cage. His face changed. Small, but I saw it. Hurt. Then understanding. Then hear this clearly, he said. If you choose to leave once this crisis is contained, I will not stop you. No one had ever offered me freedom without a price attached. Pressure built behind my ribs, hot and painful. I looked away first. Rhys cleared his throat, awkward, eyes on the floor. Sire, with respect, council convenes in 1 hour. Varric already has half the votes for temporary detention. Then we give them something stronger than rumor, Aemon said, tapping the still glowing basin. A verified medical record and lineage mark under healer seal. Varric's voice floated from the corridor before the door opened. Adorable. Science. He entered without waiting, immaculate in dark formal robes threaded with silver law knots. Mid-50s maybe, with a handsome face sharpened by calculation and eyes the color of old coins, bright, cold, appraising. He looked at me the way butchers looked at livestock they planned to weigh. So, he said, the miracle girl breathes. The king stepped between us. You weren't summoned. Varric spread his hands. And yet, I come bearing mercy. He lifted a parchment tube. Council compromise. She remains in your wing tonight under triple guard. At dawn she appears before Moon Court for oath-binding and truth trial. Refuse, and your veto collapses under emergency statute. He smiled without warmth. Sign, and I help you avoid war with Blackridge. The king didn't take the tube. You mean help yourself avoid losing power? Varric's smile thinned. Power is a tool. Chaos is a fire. I prevent the second with the first. He turned that cold gaze on me. Tell me, child, did Garrick beat loyalty into you, or only silence? My pulse kicked hard. I said nothing. Varric leaned closer, voice soft. No matter. Tomorrow the court will pull truth from your tongue either way. The king moved barely, and Varric stepped back with a small bow. 1 hour, nephew, Varric said. After that, this becomes bigger than your instincts. He left with the whisper of expensive cloth and the certainty of someone used to winning rooms before he entered them. When the door shut, I realized I was shaking again. Breathe, Talia murmured. I did. In, out, in. The king was watching me, not touching, waiting for permission he didn't ask out loud. I gave a tiny nod. He crossed the space slowly and offered his hand, palm up. I set mine in it. The bond surged. Warm, fierce, immediate, less panic this time, more anchor. Not ownership, not demand. Just a line thrown to someone drowning. Later, when the corridors quieted and council bells rang in the distant tower, he found me standing alone in a small herb court tucked between stone walls. Night air smelled of rosemary and snow. Moonlight silvered the frost on the leaves. I had wrapped his cloak tighter over Talia's borrowed shift, but cold still climbed my bones. I thought you were resting, he said from the archway. Couldn't. I didn't turn. Every time I close my eyes, I hear them deciding what I am. He came to stand beside me, a respectful arm's length away. They don't decide that. They always have. Silence. Wind rattled dry stems. After a moment, he said, When I was 15, the council decided my mother's fever was a political inconvenience. I looked at him then. His face was unreadable, but his voice had roughened. She was from a minor river pack, not high enough for their alliances. Aemon begged to bring in an outside healer with old blood methods. Varric delayed the writ 3 days to debate precedent. His jaw flexed. She died before sunset on the 3rd. The garden seemed to tilt. "I'm sorry," I said, because there was nothing else. He gave a short nod. I learned early what men like him called duty. I studied his profile in moonlight, the scar at his chin, the exhaustion under his eyes, the control held so tight it must have hurt. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Be honest. Is it only the bond?" He turned fully toward me. "No." My breath stalled. "The bond is loud." A humorless breath, almost a laugh. "It tells my wolf to put you behind my ribs and bite anything that comes close, but I would have stopped at that gate even without it. I saw your injuries. I heard fear in your voice when you said chains. I know what that means." My throat burned. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "Any of it. Being wanted, being looked at like I matter. It feels like standing on ice that might break." He held my gaze. "Then we test each step before we put weight on it." So simple, so impossible. I didn't realize I'd moved until I was close enough to feel his heat through the cold. He lifted his hand, paused in midair. "May I?" he asked. No one in my life had asked that question and meant it. I nodded. His fingers brushed a strand of hair from my face. Nothing more. The touch was so gentle it hurt. My eyes stung unexpectedly. I hated tears. He pretended not to see them. "Tomorrow in Moon Court," he said softly. "They'll try to corner you with law words and fear. You can answer as little as you choose. If you want silence, I'll defend silence." I gave a shaky smile. "You're very sure you can win?" "I'm very sure I can fight." For the first time that night, I laughed for real. A small, startled sound. He smiled back, brief and devastating. Boots pounded in the corridor. Rhys burst into the garden arch out of breath. "Sire, Aemon's wing, now." We ran. The ward doors stood open. Inside, 2 healers were on the floor, alive, groaning, wrists bound with gauze strips. Shelves lay shattered, glass and herbs everywhere. The air stank of bitter almonds and smoke. "Aemon!" I shouted. A choked sound answered from the treatment room. We found him slumped against the table, gray at the lips, one hand clamped over a deep cut in his side. Blood soaked his robe. His other hand pointed weakly at the far wall where an inner service panel hung open. "Taken," he rasped. "They took the records." And his eyes found mine, panic cutting through pain. "They took your blood sample." The king dropped to one knee, pressing cloth to Aemon's wound. "Who?" Aemon coughed red. "Masked. Inner guard uniforms. One wore council signet under glove." He grabbed the king's wrist with surprising strength. "Not robbery. They're making a forgery. If Varric presents altered blood at court, she fails truth trial before it starts." Rhys swore and spun toward the door. "I'll seal the wing." A whistle sliced the air. I saw the bolt a heartbeat too late, a black-shafted quarrel punching through the open window lattice toward the king's back. "Down!" I screamed. He turned, but not fast enough. The bolt struck high under his shoulder blade with a wet, sick sound. He staggered, hit the floor hard. For one frozen second, everything stopped. The healers, Rhys, me. Even the flame in the brazier seemed to hang still. Then the room exploded into motion. "Sniper!" Rhys roared, drawing steel and lunging for the window. The king tried to rise and failed, teeth bared against a groan. Dark blood spread fast across his shirt around the bolt's fletching. The shaft was lacquered black, the tip already smoking where it touched flesh. Wolfsbane. Aemon went white. "Don't pull it," he gasped. "Poisoned. Moonfire resin. He has minutes before paralysis." Minutes. I dropped beside the king, hands hovering uselessly over blood and toxin and terror. His eyes found mine, gold blazing through pain. "Mara," he ground out, voice breaking. "Run." From the corridor came the thunder of more boots. Too many, too coordinated. Not rescue. Reese looked back once, face grim. "They're inside the inner wing. We're cut off." Eamon's gaze locked on my left wrist, on the birthmark now burning so hot I thought skin might split. "Mara," he whispered, desperate, "if Ashthorn truly woke in you, now or never." The door shuddered under a heavy impact. Again. Wood splintered. I put both blood-slick hands over the king's wound as the lock blew inward, and deep in my bones, something ancient finally opened its eyes. I put my hands flat over the king's wound, and the burning in my wrist exploded. Not heat. More like a door splintering inward. The world changed. Blood became visible. Not with my eyes, but with something under them. Rivers of pulse and pressure, bright inside skin, dark where poison spread. I felt the king's heartbeat stutter against my palms. Felt moonfire resin crawling from the bolt tip into muscle, reaching for his spine. The door burst open. 3 men in inner guard uniforms stormed in with silver nets and short blades blackened at the edge. Behind them, calm as a winter grave, stepped Varric. "Take the girl," he said. "If the king interferes, finish what the bolt began." Reese roared and met the first attacker shoulder first, steel ringing as their blades collided. Talia grabbed a broken chair leg and swung at another with terrifying precision. Eamon tried to rise, failed, and spat blood on the floor. I didn't move from the king. He was fighting paralysis, jaw clenched so hard I heard his teeth grind. "Mara," he rasped. "Go." "No." Varric's cold gaze slid to me. "Child, you are kneeling in treason." Something feral bared teeth in my chest. I looked up at him through blood and smoke. "I've knelt enough." I pressed harder over the wound and reached inward, toward marrow, toward memory, toward my mother's hands tracing circles on my wrist. "It sleeps." "Wake," I whispered. Pain lanced from my palms to my shoulders. Gold-white light threaded between my fingers and sank into torn flesh. The king arched with a strangled sound as the bolt tip hissed. Black smoke curled from the wound and into my hands, ice cold and vile. Poison. I was pulling it. Too much, too fast. My vision went gray at the edges. Nausea hit so hard I almost vomited on him. I held on. Across the room, Reese took a cut along his forearm and still drove his attacker into a shelf. Glass shattered. Talia cracked her chair leg across a jaw. Varric stepped back from the melee, furious now. "Kill her," he snapped. "Now!" The third attacker lunged toward me. I turned, one hand still on the king, and flung my free arm out on instinct. Blood answered. The attacker's nose burst red. He stumbled mid-stride, choking as if an invisible fist had closed around his throat. Not enough to kill. Enough to drop him. He crashed to his knees, clawing at air. I stared at my own hand in shock. Varric stared too, then smiled, thin and hungry. "There it is. Monstrous." "Say that again," Reese growled, blade at another man's neck. Varric ignored him. "You think they'll crown you for this, girl? They'll burn you for witch blood before dawn." "Better witch than traitor," Talia shot back. The king convulsed under my palm. Poison still spread, slower now but moving. Eamon dragged himself closer, shoved a leather roll toward me with shaking fingers. "Needle," he gasped, "bone silver, left of wound. Draw it out." I grabbed the needle, plunged it where he pointed, and felt resistance. Then a sick pop as metal scraped metal. The quarrel head came free in a spray of blood and black resin. I slapped it to the floor and crushed it under my heel. Light pulsed from my wrist mark, spilled down my arm, and poured into the king's wound like molten moonlight. Flesh knit by ragged increments. Bleeding slowed. He sucked in a full breath. Gold flared in his eyes. Varric's composure cracked for the first time. Impossible. No, Aemon whispered. Awe and terror tangled together. Ashthorn. The first attacker broke from Rhys and bolted for the corridor. Rhys threw his sword, not at the man's back, but at the door. The blade buried in wood, pinning it shut half open. No one leaves, he barked. Varric's hand slipped inside his sleeve. Crossbow pin, I shouted. Rhys spun just as Varric flicked a slim spring-loaded dart toward the bed. Rhys caught it in his injured arm with a hiss and snapped the shaft out, black poison already bubbling at the tip. Coward, Rhys snarled. Pragmatist, Varric said. He pivoted toward the service panel, the escape route his men had used. I rose, swaying, blood slicked to my elbows. The king caught my wrist weakly. Don't. For 19 years I had survived by obeying. I kissed his forehead, quick, fierce, a promise, and pulled free. Lock the wing, I told Rhys. Seal every stair. No one in council colors leaves this fortress. Then I ran after Varric. The service passage was narrow and unlit, all damp stone and old dust. Varric's footsteps echoed ahead, precise even in retreat. Mine slapped barefoot through grime, knee screaming with each stride, lungs burning. He emerged into the North Archive corridor and nearly collided with 2 council guards. Emergency statute, he snapped. Detain? Don't, I said behind him. All 3 turned. The guards saw blood all over me, saw the glow still leaking faintly from my left wrist, and hesitated. Varric recovered first. She assaulted the king in a blood frenzy, by law. She saved him, I said. My voice shook. I hated it. I kept going anyway. She pulled wolfsbane from his spine while your men tried to net me. I met the guards' eyes, one at a time. Ask yourselves why inner wing attackers wore your uniform. One guard looked at Varric's sleeve, where dark spatters stained expensive cloth. Varric's smile returned, colder. A convenient story from a runaway slave. I stepped closer. Then call Moon Court now. Public hearing. Truth basin. His eyes flicked just once. There. Fear. You are in no position to demand. I demand because you wanted me in a cell where no one could hear me scream. My voice rose, carrying down stone. Doors began to open. Faces appeared. Servants, scribes, off-duty warriors. You stole my blood sample and tried to kill your king. You want silence. You won't get it. More footsteps thundered behind me. Rhys, Talia, and 6 armed guards rounded the corner. Rhys's forearm was bandaged tight and already seeping red. He planted himself at my shoulder. By command of the Crown Wolf, High Regent Varric is confined pending Moon Court inquiry. Varric laughed. On whose witness? A captain who disobeyed protocol? A healer bleeding out on a floor? On mine. The king's voice hit the corridor like iron striking stone. He came down the hall with 2 warriors bracing him, shirt open at the shoulder where fresh bandages wrapped his back. Pale with blood loss, eyes like storms and very much alive. Varric actually stepped backward. The king didn't look at him first. He looked at me, scanning my face, my hands, as if counting me in one piece. Only then did he turn. You aimed for my spine, he said to Varric. Again. Varric lifted his chin. I aimed for stability. Bind him, the king said. Varric's mask finally split. You would chain your mother's brother on a servant's accusation? The king's jaw hardened, on attempted regicide. Guards moved. Varric struck one with an elbow, twisted, and for an instant almost broke free. Then I reached. Not touching, just willing. And his right wrist spasmed. The knife hidden there clattered to the floor. He stared at his own hand in horror. I held his gaze. No more hidden blades. Rhys shoved him to his knees and snapped silver cuffs around his wrists. Moon Court, the king said. Now, open doors. Full witness. The moon court chamber was a circle of black stone open to the night through a wide oculus. Silver fire burned in wall sconces. By the time we entered, the galleries were packed. Council members in formal braids, commanders, elders, servants pressed shoulder to shoulder, rumor crackling through them like dry tinder. Varric stood in the center in cuffs, still trying to wear dignity like armor. At the far side, another group waited under guard. Garrick of Blackridge in fur-lined mail, Torrin beside him with 4 livid scars raking his face, and Luna Selene wrapped in white fur and contempt. Seeing them hit me like old smoke in my lungs. Torrin's eyes found me and went mean. There's my prey. Rhys's hand went to his sword. The king lifted 2 fingers. Rhys stilled. The master of court struck his staff once. Moon Court convened under emergency statute. Charges: attempted regicide, evidence tampering, unlawful seizure petition, and petition of extradition from Blackridge. Varric spoke first, smooth again. Your Honors, hysteria has outrun reason. I requested lawful quarantine for an unknown border crosser. In response, I was assaulted and bound by a bond-addled king. I demand immediate release and enforcement of interpack property accords. Property? I said before I could stop myself. Garrick answered, voice booming. The girl was born under my roof, fed by my stores, branded under my law. She attacked my heir. He shoved Torrin forward so everyone could see the scars. Look what she did. Torrin smirked at me. Should have gutted me when you had the chance. The chamber murmured. The king rose from his chair, slow but steady. Mara Ashthorne is under crown protection. Extradition denied. Garrick bared his teeth. Then it's war. Maybe, I said, stepping into the circle before anyone could stop me. Every eye turned. My knees wanted to fold. I locked them. I ran your hunt because you ordered it, I said to Garrick, loud enough for the galleries. You called me bait. Your son pinned me to the ground and tore my shirt open. My voice shook once, then steadied. I cut him to get free. Selene scoffed. Liar. Then swear it false, I said, turning to her. In the basin. A silver bowl was brought, moon water still as glass. Aemon, pale, stitched, alive, hobbled forward and set healer seals beside it. Ashthorne Truth Resonance recognized under old law, he announced. Any sworn lie in active basin triggers blood recoil, fatal in extreme cases. Varric's mouth tightened. Superstition. Prove it, I said. I sliced my thumb with Aemon's lancet and let one drop fall. The basin flared pale gold. Symbols climbed the rim like waking vines. A collective gasp rippled through the court. I faced Torrin first. Say it. Say you did not assault me beyond the stones. Torrin laughed too loudly. I did know. He doubled over mid-word, clutching his throat. Blood ran from his nose in a sudden sheet. The old scars on his face split open, red threading down his jaw. He screamed. Panic broke in the gallery. Silence! The master of court shouted, pounding his staff. I turned to Garrick, who had gone ash gray. Say I was your property. Garrick's lips peeled back. You were born in my... His right hand seized. Fingers twisted backward with a crack. He roared and dropped to one knee, breath sawing. Aemon's voice rang clear. Old law stands. No wolf may own another under moon oath. Blackridge has been in violation for years. Varric lunged verbally where his allies fell. Parlor tricks. She's coercing physiology with bloodcraft. Like this? I asked. I nodded toward Rhys. He pulled from his belt pouch the stolen vial recovered from Varric's man in the wing. My blood, diluted and darkened with something black. Aemon held it up. Tampered sample? Nightshade and corpse ash, prepared to fail moon test. All eyes swung to Varric. He straightened as far as cuffs allowed. I did what weak rulers won't. I cut rot before it spreads. The king's voice dropped to lethal quiet. You shot me in my own house. Varric smiled, and it was ugly now. I should have done it years ago, when you started mistaking mercy for strength. He moved then, faster than a cuffed man should move, snatching the guard's side dagger as if his wrists were boneless and flinging himself toward me. I didn't scream. I stepped in. His blade came down. I caught his wrist with both hands and felt bone under skin, brittle as dry twigs in my grasp. Power surged, white hot, and his radius snapped with a wet crack. The dagger clanged away. Varric shrieked. Rhys tackled him flat, pinning him with a knee between the shoulders. Breathing hard, I crouched to Varric's eye level. You kept calling me child. His face was slick with sweat, lips white. You are a weapon in a pretty cage. No, I said. I'm the door you couldn't lock. I stood. The king faced the court. Verdict. The master of court, voice shaking but formal, read from the silver tablets as scribes scratched furiously. Varric, son of Ardon, guilty of attempted regicide, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. Sentence: title stripped, blood rights severed, life imprisonment below iron ward. Varric spat blood at the king's boots. You'll lose your throne to her. The king didn't blink. Then I'll lose it with honor. Guards hauled Varric away, cursing until the doors swallowed him. Garrick tried to stand and failed. You can't touch me. I'm an alpha. The king looked to me. Do you wish to press charges under crown law? I met Garrick's pale, dead eyes and thought of cellars, brands, hunger, Torrhen's hands, my mother's grave with no marker. Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. Then hear judgment, the king said. Garrick of Blackridge, stripped of alpha status for illegal enslavement, torture, and attempted unlawful extradition. Remanded to border tribunal for sentencing under crown oversight. His gaze shifted to Torrhen. Torrhen, convicted of assault and attempted murder during sanctioned hunt, 10 years iron hold, no challenge rights after release. Selene stepped forward, furious. And me? I did nothing. I looked at her. Exactly. The king said, Selene of Blackridge, complicit by command authority. Exiled to southern kin territory. Return under crown border and you forfeit your throat. She slapped Torrhen when he tried to grab her. Guards separated them. The master struck the staff one final time. Moon Court closed. My legs finally gave. The king caught me before I hit the floor. They gave us his private chamber and locked everyone else out. Dawn bled pale across the shutters. The room smelled of cedar smoke and clean linen and the copper edge of old blood. Aemon had rebandaged the king's shoulder and my palms, then stopped in the doorway and said, The poison is mostly gone, but the bond is raw. If you leave it unsealed after this kind of shock, you'll both keep bleeding power into each other. Nightmares, pain spikes, possible frenzy. He had looked at each of us in turn. Marking would settle it, only if both consent. Then he left. Now it was just us. The king sat on the edge of the bed, shirt unlaced, bandage white against bronze skin. I stood by the hearth wrapped in his cloak, suddenly more afraid than I had been in Moon Court. Not of him. Of wanting this too much. He watched me, careful. That same restraint like a hand held out instead of closed. Mara. I lifted my eyes. My name is Kale, he said quietly. If you choose this, I want you to choose me. Not a title. Kyle. It fit him, hard and warm at once. He continued, voice roughening. If you say no, nothing changes about your freedom. You keep your rooms, your protection, your choices. I will not claim what you don't offer. The bond pulled between us, aching. I crossed the room slowly until I stood between his knees. His hands stayed at his sides. Do you want it? I asked. Not for court. Not for politics. For you. His breath hitched. I have wanted you since the gate. I have feared wanting you since the gate. A faint, self-mocking smile. But yes, gods, yes. I touched his cheek. Stubble rasped my palm. Then I choose you, Kale. His eyes closed for one heartbeat, relief so naked it undid me. When he opened them, gold glinted at the edges. May I mark you? I nodded, then forced the word out because I needed him to hear it clear. Yes. He rose, slow enough that I could step back if I wished. I didn't. He guided me to sit on the bed, then knelt in front of me, an alpha king kneeling, still asking with his eyes. I threaded my fingers into his hair and tilted my head, exposing the junction of neck and shoulder where pulse fluttered. My body trembled. He pressed one open-mouthed kiss there first, warm and reverent. Another. His hand spread over my ribs, grounding. Then his teeth sank in. Pain flashed bright, sharp enough to drag a cry from my throat. Instantly it changed, heat flooding outward from the bite in molten waves, racing down my spine, pooling low in my belly, up into my chest where the bond lived. I felt him in me like thunder. Protectiveness, hunger, awe, fear, love so fierce it almost hurt. Mine, he breathed against my skin, voice wrecked. Yours, I gasped, clutching his shoulders. Light burst behind my eyes, silver and gold braided together, old stone monoliths, snow forests, a childhood laugh I hadn't heard in years, his grief at 15 beside his mother's bed, my mother's whisper it sleeps, then waking, fully waking, our pulses locking into one steady rhythm. He licked the wound once, gentling. The pain became a deep, throbbing sweetness that made me shiver. I pulled him up by his shoulders until we were face to face, both breathing hard. Your turn, he said, voice unsteady with want and surrender. May I mark you, Kale? He bared his throat without hesitation, turning his head to give me the same vulnerable place between neck and shoulder. Yes, Mara, mark me. I kissed his skin first, tasting salt and cedar. His pulse jumped under my mouth. I bit down. His groan shook through both of us. Pain, yes, but threaded with fierce pleasure that slammed across the bond and back into me, doubling, tripling. Power surged from my bones into his into mine, meeting and sealing. I felt the last residue of poison burn away from his blood like frost under sun. He felt my old fractures, fear, hunger, shame, and wrapped them in something steady and unbreakable. Mine, I whispered into his skin. He caught my face, forehead to forehead. Yours, mate, mate, I echoed, and the words settled inside me like a home being built in real time. The bond clicked into place with an almost audible snap. Silence followed, not empty, but full. No frantic pull, no jagged ache, just presence. Him, bright and constant at the edge of my thoughts. Me, twined through his. We lay down tangled together, his arms around me, my cheek over his heart. Every few breaths he kissed my hair as if checking I was still there. I traced circles on his wrist like my mother once had on mine. Outside, dawn bells rang. Inside, for the first time in my life, I felt safe enough to sleep. The first thaw came 3 days later, and with it, judgment in the Black Ridge courtyard. I stood on the old stone steps where Garrick used to sit above everyone like a god. Now he knelt in chains below me, stripped of his alpha torque, beard matted, eyes still pale and hateful. Torin knelt beside him in iron restraints, scarred face rigid with disbelief. Celine was already gone under exile escort at sunrise. Crown guards ringed the yard. Blackridge wolves packed the edges silent, watching which way history would turn. Kale stood at my right in dark armor, marked and unashamed. Reese at his left, arm healed, expression carved from discipline. Eamon and Talia behind us with a team of healers and clerks carrying ledgers. I stepped forward and read from the decree myself. By Moon Court verdict, all bonded labor under Garrick's rule is null. All brands are legally void. Any wolf held by force is free to choose residence, work, and pack petition under Crown protection. A murmur rippled, disbelief, then something brighter. I looked to the slaughter shed where I had scrubbed blood from stone until my hands bled. Open every locked cellar, Reese signaled. Guards moved when the first thin, blinking faces emerged. Boys, women, an old man with a collar scar white around his throat. The yard broke into sobs, shouts, stunned silence. Garrick spat at my boots. You think this makes you queen? I met his stare. No, it makes me not you. He lunged as far as chains allowed. Guards yanked him back. Cale's voice carried across the courtyard. Prison transfer. Garrick shouted until they gagged him. Torrin screamed promises of revenge. No one answered. They were hauled to iron wagons under heavy guard, headed for border tribunal and then the northern hold. I watched until the wagons disappeared. Then I turned to the freed wolves and said, "There's food in the lower hall and healers in the east wing. No one will strike you for taking either." A little girl with split knuckles stared up at me and whispered, "Are you Luna now?" I crouched so we were eye level. If I am, it means no one here kneels from fear again. She considered that, then offered me half of a stolen apple she had hidden in her sleeve. I took it like it was a crown. That night, back in the northern fortress, the great hall filled, not for a trial, but for a vow. No jeweled diadem, no gilded spectacle, just pack, witnesses, moonlight pouring through high windows, and Cale's hand warm in mine. The master of court spoke formal words. Reese knelt and swore fealty first, voice steady. Talia tied silver thread around my wrist over the old birthmark. Eamon pressed a healer's seal into my palm and said, smiling through wet eyes, "Ashthorn House restored." Cale turned to me before the final oath. "Mara Ashthorn, will you stand beside me as mate, as Luna, as queen if the title pleases you, and as yourself before all else?" I laughed softly. "As myself first, beside you always." We sealed it with a kiss that tasted of smoke and winter and home. Later, when the hall emptied and stars burned above the battlements, we stood on the same wall where he had first stopped me at the gate. His arm circled my waist. Mine rested over his heart, feeling the settled bond hum slow and content. Below us, patrols moved in calm lines. No screams, no bells for hunts, just the ordinary sounds of a kingdom exhaling. "Cold?" he murmured. "A little." He wrapped his cloak around both of us. I leaned into him and he pressed his mouth to the mark on my neck like a prayer. "They said my bloodline was extinct," I whispered. His smile brushed my temple. "They were wrong. In my bones, ancient power no longer slept. It sang, quiet now, steady, answered by his. Mine, yours, mate, and at last, ours."